Okay, so I would like to welcome everybody to this workshop on world building for Piton Noir. And what we're going to do today is a collaborative world building exercise. So I will present a scenario to the group, and I would ask that each person contribute something to the idea and that everybody builds off of that idea. And we'll just see where that takes us, because we want to make sure that in a story, our internal logic is consistent and that we have thought through the ramifications of the decisions that we have made. The scenarios I've chosen are science fiction, fantasy related, because that is the theme of Piton Noir. And so did anybody have any questions before we jump into this?
Actually, someone in Whitey Kubali Writers had asked, what is world building? So in terms of the definition, maybe we could start there.
Yeah, world building is an excellent question. World building is creating a world that is different from our own, that is as consistent or inconsistent as our current story. Failures in world building often result in people being drawn out of a story, and that's the opposite of what you're trying to do as a writer. So for example, world building would be, if I'm creating an intergalactic empire, I need to figure out how they get around. So I need to figure out what transportation system are they using warp? Are they teleporting? Are they using some other method? And then once I know that, then I can move on to the next thing. It's like, how far away are these planets? Are they at war? If they're at war, what weapons are they using? So world building is filling in all of those holes so that when you go to write your story, that you have an answer to those questions, because you never know what your characters are going to bring up, and you're going to want to have some sort of answer to that, to those questions. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So my first scenario, and they all center around Dominica. So you are the subject matter experts on this. I decided that aliens have come to Earth, and they've decided to set up an embassy in Dominica.
Okay.
Okay. My first question is, why are they doing this?
That's a very good question.
What would make sense for aliens to, why would they do this? Why would they make contact Dominicans as opposed to anybody else on the planet?
Natural.
Natural? Okay.
Yeah, the mountains and all that stuff, easy to hide, easy to do signals.
Okay. So the idea of natural would imply that the aliens value
I think they would want to hide. They would want to hide.
Oh,
Yes.
they want to hide. Okay.
Mhm.
That's interesting. So these are nature-loving aliens that want to hide.
I think they want to tap into our geothermal energy, because we have the most volcanoes per capita, I think, of any country. So maybe we're a geothermal marvel that they want to investigate.
Okay, so what does that say about those aliens then? If we take all that together, what are these aliens like, and what do they want?
Resources.
Some things they don't have. They want things they don't have. They could want our water.
Okay. And if they wanted the water, I mean, water is easy to get out in space, right? I mean, there's entire asteroid belts full of rocky, icy places, so it's easier to get elsewhere. I think it would have to be something else if they were to come bother landing on a planet.
We've got special minerals in our water.
Oh, I like that. Okay, special minerals. That's something could be rare and unique to Dominica that is hitherto undiscovered, that creates the natural and lush environment of the island, right? And that could explain it. That could be why they chose Dominica. But my next question is, how would Dominicans react to aliens landing and setting up an embassy in Roseau?
How did they react when the Haitians came? I don't know. Or the Chinese came, or any of those.
I don't know how they reacted. I think that would be an interesting thing to know. Does anybody know how they reacted?
You mean
Come on,
about the
Gloria.
Chinese? I think maybe that they bought some passports. Maybe that there's maybe aliens had bought passports and they came to the country.
I love that idea. I absolutely love that idea. That was one of the first things Nicole told me about the island when I first met her.
Oh no, really?
Yeah.
I'm so embarrassed. I don't remember.
But I love the idea of aliens buying Dominican citizenship.
Yeah.
I think that would be a fun story to write. Someone has to do that. Oh my. But think about the people that you know who live in Roseau, and how would they react to an alien just showing up and setting up camp?
It depended on the physical appearance of the aliens.
Okay, why so?
Well, if the aliens do look a bit like human beings, they would not instill fear in people. But if the aliens looked anyway, the way we picture aliens, so different from us, I think people would be cowering in fear or probably setting fire to their buildings.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that they would burn them out?
Well, if they look anywhere like the aliens we see on the typical alien in the media, well, all these, of course, are fictitious images. But if they resemble them, our people would be scared and would right away think of evil, think of the devil, and would not associate with them.
That's interesting. I think you've tapped into something. You've tapped into human fear, and that's great. That's a wonderful motivator for a story. And you mentioned burning buildings as a potential reaction. But what other sort of reactions do people have when they're afraid?
Typically they clamor for the authorities to do something.
Okay.
So they would go to their parliamentary representative and demand that he take their case to government, and we don't want these creatures moving into our neighborhood and into our community. We don't see we don't feel comfortable with them here. We don't see a benefit to them being here. And we want them gone. So I think our expectation is that government needs to do something, as versus the pitchforks and torches approach.
Well, it's not a situation where people could leave the area. In other places, maybe the communities would just vacate the area. But in Dominica, where would we go? To the sea, to Mont Diablote? So I think then that people realizing that there's no place to run, they have to somehow get around the situation. And that may be why they would attempt, fear may cause them not even to attempt violence, wondering, are these aliens stronger than we are? What would they do to me or my family? Do they have supernatural powers? That's what the people would be thinking about. So, the fear would cause some form of action, but not the kind where they would want to confront them directly.
Is that
For me, I see a lot of people will be doing pelerinage or praying the crosses. They pray more to God because they don't know what's to come. And also I can see a lot of like the business people who care about money. They can try to make deals with these people and see with the aliens to see what they can get from them, how they can prosper from the aliens.
Yeah. So we have, if we were to create characters for this story, who would we have? What types of people would we need in the story to tell to paint a complete picture of what this scenario would look like?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah. So if we're going to create a story out of this idea that we're developing, we would need certain types of characters. right? And
Oh,
for
okay.
example, Dorothy and Sharon both mentioned religion, the devil. I think we would need a priest or a pastor of some sort, a religious leader who would be able to either be pro or anti-alien. I think that would be an interesting dynamic, but would definitely have to tap into that strain of Dominican culture for sure. Yeah.
We need politicians.
Yeah, politicians for sure.
Then we
Politicians,
would
how like
perhaps a young couple who would, how would the aliens be discovered? How would they first appear? Would a young couple maybe see them on their farm in a corner one day and then would more appear in a certain area? I mean, how would they be discovered? Who would discover them?
Well, I'm thinking the aliens took this guy after he come from a party. He was so drunk, they took him up and he was forced to bring them back to his area.
Yeah, that's a good place.
that's an interesting idea.
I can I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, of course.
I usually like to laugh. So I am seeing that the prime minister or the government offered them the passports and they came here, they're not seeing what it is that they were expecting, nothing that they can relate to. And characters I'm seeing, probably a madman on the road who is clueless, the ministers, the government people running around screaming. I'm seeing, we have that strong belief in what you call it? It's voodoo, obia, whatever it is. I think I am seeing one of these characters trying to cast a spell to get them out.
Now, I forgive my ignorance on this issue, but does voodoo actually exist, or is it more in the realm of myth?
No, people do practice what we call obia, which
Okay.
I guess Mrs. Levy might know better than I what that branch, if that branches off of voodoo. But yeah, so there are people who practice it, and it's still sort of a secretive thing. So it's kind of the thing, if you've heard, everybody knows somebody who's been to an obia person, but nobody ever admits that they were the person who went. So, and somehow they seem able to find, when you need one, you're able to find one somehow. I don't know how it's done, but and Dominica is supposed to have some of the strongest obia. It's one of those kind of ironic things where they say the Haitians come to Dominica to get their obia done, and Dominicans go to Haiti to get theirs done, because and then the Guadeloupeans. So it's, yeah.
Is that what they call like the Gadet Zafe?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to remember. The guy is up there.
Yeah. So you'll have to translate that for Chris.
What do they call them? A shaman? I think.
Okay.
I think that's all.
Okay, I love this idea of somebody, a practitioner, casting a spell against the aliens and it working significantly better than it should. Because I think that would be the step up that you would need if you're going to be fighting radically technologically advanced aliens, right?
Magic.
So all of a sudden our science fiction story has an element of fantasy to it, but we can also tie it back to that element that the aliens came to Dominica to find. Maybe that's the element. Maybe that's what they want in the water. Maybe it actually is in the water of Dominica. I don't know. The obia practitioners have been dosing the water with magical things for years. It's become part of the island, and the aliens detected it. They come down, and their in is the economic passport. I think we need to flesh out a little bit more the politicians. I don't know much about Dominican politics, so the different parties would probably react in slightly different ways, I would imagine.
It would depend on whose idea it was. So if it's if it was a government initiative, then all of the opposition parties would be up in arms. And of course, if it was an opposition proposal, then the government would decry it as, something negative, put it that way.
And how strong, let's say it's not a political idea, maybe it's something the administration the public service just decided, well, they've met all the criteria, let's just start issuing these things because it's going to bring in some money.
You mean knowing that they are aliens?
Yes.
Oh.
I mean, nominally, the civil service is independent, so they would have that right. It would cause a political storm, and obviously they wouldn't do it without permission, but interesting idea.
Dominica, not so independent.
Oh, okay. So what are those crosslinks then?
You started it, Gloria.
Yeah,
No. I think, no, but I mean, everybody knows it. I mean, we've never been so divided. Before you could, now it's almost like you sections, this one or that, and it doesn't have anything in between, and so many things are being done, and people,
Gloria, I think you're onto something.
No. I saw something, right? When they said that when the intelligent people are silent, fools flourish. That's what's happening in Dominica. People are not talking about anything, and everything is along political lines.
Okay, so
That's the state.
if we extend that idea to our story, then we could potentially have different branches of the government, civil service, lining up behind different political parties in reaction to these aliens.
Well, if the aliens are there for the government, things will go through, no matter what the opposition says.
But what if the aliens will be used to create a medicine from the vaccine? You know what I mean? For that COVID thing, like that's why they bring them here, so that we can create a medicine. Like if they inject us with, like we are part of the alien DNA in us. Now we're gonna be really super alien, super strong. Probably that's why they're gonna explain why people are gleeking. We are part snake, part this and that.
Well, you've tapped into something really interesting, because there would be definite scientific advances that would be available to Dominicans that would not be available to, let's say, the Americans. We would also have to consider how your neighbors would react. I'm not sure about the politics of the Caribbean, but I know the Americans wouldn't like it. But if we think more locally, how do you think the other islands would react to this all of a sudden vast resource that they don't have access to?
They'd resent us.
And how would that manifest?
Because like we have this, now we have this medicine that they don't have. We're gonna sell it at a very expensive price to other people, maybe big up our country with that alien technology, sell to the whole world. Now we probably could surpass China, surpass US, right? And actually grow. We're able to go probably travel back and forth worlds where the aliens living, come back, Dominica, back and forth, all that stuff like that, getting technology, growing, making a really good super powerhouse.
We probably see more of the backdoor culture. People want to come to our country to get what we have. The neighboring islands, they want to tap into that as well. And by all means, illegal forms, whichever way, confusion, chaos.
Or the governments might decide to come together, and each country could send 2 representatives so that the people could share in that or learn something of what is going on. So it could create some form of unity where the countries, the islands want to help one another.
I love this.
Or are we not that altruistic?
One of my concerns with this is that how many people live on the island?
About 60,000, 70,000. Is that the latest?
Let's say it tops out at 100. Let's just go with that. There are more people that live in the city of Winnipeg, right? So I think we would have to consider the fact that there are so few Dominicans on the island, and all of a sudden they would have access to this technology. Sharon had mentioned going up against China and the States as a superpower. Don't really have the people for that. So I think that becomes a really interesting complication in the story, where there's this small population with a resource that everybody wants, theoretically.
I don't know, sorry. I don't know if I missed anything because I wasn't there at the beginning, but where did the aliens come from? Is there something that I missed? Sorry
Nope.
about
You
that.
can tell me where they came from.
Oh, because to me, when I entered, it was a situation where you all were discussing that the aliens came in and they were invited by the government because they had passports. So I'm wondering, where did the government go to sell those passports? Is it something I missed?
No, I think you found a
Nope.
big hole in our story. That's fantastic. That's the whole point of this.
So as you all were discussing, I was thinking of the aliens came out from under the sea
Oh, wow.
and just landed.
Okay.
So they've been here all this time?
Well, they have the world. We think of the world as something above spaceship and spacecraft and stuff like that. But I was thinking of under the sea. When Christopher Columbus came and his crew, they came from beyond the sea. I mean, they sailed.
Yep. Yeah.
But those aliens, I'm wondering if it wasn't like a geographic thing that happened and just opened up under the sea and allowed them to zoom up and realize, hey, we have hit the world and it's Dominica first they landed, or something like that, because I'm not hearing where they came from, or whether it's just automatic or something in your thinking that they just appeared.
That's a
But
unique take on it.
the story. The story.
I like that it's random. That's really neat. Yeah. Yeah. That they
Another
showed
thing
up.
could be that another thing could be we just had where our boiling lake, the water level is low, so maybe we could make them come up from there or somewhere around there. The water level is much lower than it normally is.
But wouldn't
So
they be poached? Wouldn't they be poached? I mean,
no, well, water
boiling.
level low could also mean that things
They're
have
draining.
stopped. Yeah, water level low could also mean that things have stopped, or they are heat resistant aliens.
And then that plays into how alien do they look if they come from water? I think that
That is boiling water. That
are they in fact alien if they are natives?
Ooh.
If they come from within Dominica, are they not more Dominican than the rest of us topsiders?
I think that has some very interesting.
They come from under the earth, from under.
But they're coming from under
They were
our
not on
boiling
land
lake.
before. Yes.
So then they're on Dominican soil. So that means that they're native.
No, they could have. That is the exit point. It could come from somewhere, like a tunnel.
Right. Fair enough.
Okay, so have we walked around this? Are there any more holes or questions that we might have about this that we haven't touched on?
I guess I have a question, which is when I think of world building, it seems to me that we're kind of tackling this from a sort of a socio-political angle. And I guess I think of world building as almost creating an ecosystem, and then you build on that. So is that or maybe looking at the way Star Trek and Star Wars do it. I think Star Trek, they tend to get very technical, explaining all of the technology and, all about the aliens and their homeworld and blah, blah, blah. And Star Wars presumes, or they start a storyline in the middle of their world. It's already built, and we learn about it as we go along, but they don't spend a lot of time doing, is it didactic teaching? I'm sorry, I'm probably using that in the wrong context, but they don't spend a lot of time explaining stuff. They just assume that the viewer will, I guess, pick it up organically as they go. So is that two different approaches to world building?
I think it's more a reflection of the narrative styles of both of the shows. Star Trek, their whole thing is exploration. So that means you're going to have to explain things that you find. But they are very techno-babbly and very heavy on that. But Star Wars is more like what you're going to probably do yourself, is where you're going to have this world, have this scenario, this situation, things are going to happen, and you're going to explain them as they come. So the socio-political approach that I've been promoting here lets you get a general idea of what is going on around your story, so that now we've thought about the political response, we've thought about the civil service. We haven't spoken about the police, but they're a branch of government. So we already have an idea of how the government might react, how the politicians might react. And so that will allow us, if we need all of a sudden a police character, to have sort of a platform to develop him a little bit more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's two general approaches to world building. There are the planners and there are the pantsers. And I'm not sure if you've ever heard these terms before, but the planners are the people who can spend, like Tolkien, years in development of a story. They do maps, they do languages, they do entire wiki articles and things about what's they do a long timeline of their story and their world, and they create a whole new magic system.
We have Joe Jonas.
Sorry about this.
Of the Jonas Brothers.
Beg your pardon. Sorry.
That's okay. He's a very nice man, I'm sure. And then we also have the pantsers, who, and I tend to fall more into the pantsers category, are people who come up with a general concept and then just see where that takes them. They have their advantages. A planner will have all of the details already worked out of how things work in the world, so the story just happens within that framework. Whereas if you're pantsing it, you're creating that framework as you write, and that allows you a lot of freedom, but it means that as you're going through your story, you need to be more aware of what you've been writing, and will cause a longer editing process as you find inconsistencies. For example, if I said that, the castle was stormed in 1824, but earlier on I said it was in 1724, right? The actual date doesn't matter, but I need to keep it consistent, so I might have to look for those details. So that gets a bit more complicated. The ultimate pantser in current media is J.R.R. Martin. The man improvises the whole story. He has a plan, but he lets it evolve naturally, which is great for having all those characters. But personally, when I was reading the novels, I found it hard to follow. There was just a lot going on. Nothing ever seemed to resolve. I didn't feel that there was progress, because that wasn't what he was trying to accomplish. He was trying to explore this world with us. So I hope that answers your question, Nicole.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I have another one, another scenario, and I think this one I know very little about, but the whole idea is that soucoyants are actually real. They live among you, okay? Now,
sorry, who's real?
Soucoyants.
Oh, Sakuya. Okay.
Sakuya.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
sorry.
I can hear that. Okay.
So the Sakuya
okay.
are real. They have, think vampires, but not vampires. Like, just if vampires were in the world, if the Sakuya were in the world, how would Dominica react?
The way they react right now, because we know they're real.
Yeah.
How many are there?
Roy, I know Roy has joined us, and this is his forte. So I don't know if maybe he doesn't have audio.
Roy?
Roy, can you type in the chat if you're able to, or just join us if you're able to?
Okay, hold on.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was on the road and I kind of got in late, so I had to rush in and stuff like that. So
That's okay.
I came right in the middle of the discussions. I was just trying to see where I can fit in.
Well,
So-
we're just starting a new topic. So, and I was saying this is right up your alley.
Right up my, oh, well, not really. I grew up listening to these stories, you know.
Just a
So,
second.
but I was always fascinated by these things.
Mhm.
But yeah, but really, I'm not even sure how much I know about these things. But as I said, I was just fascinated by them when we were growing up. My father used to tell us stories all the time, especially on moonlight nights. Sit under the mango tree and he would tell us stories, and the Sukuyans and the Lugahus and the Bliss were very, very much part of these stories, you know. So,
Okay, well-
but what I did notice though in some of these stories, and which I kind of was that in the end there's always this battle between good and evil.
Mhm.
And I think these stories, this good and evil versus evil kind of stories have been with us through from antiquity, really, you know. So that is what really fascinated me by some of these stories, was that they were just not things to scare us or things to make us afraid. They did, but there was always a good side to it and a bad side to it, right? And in the end, the good side always prevailed, you know. So that is why that is where I developed a fascination for these kinds of stories.
Mhm.
So to tie it into what Chris is asking, it's like, how do you, Chris, sorry, maybe you could rephrase the question.
Well, I'm wondering, I mean, at this point, they're in mythology and we mythologize them, but I'm trying to take that idea and put it into contemporary Dominica. So they are wandering the streets, and we know this. And do we know who they are? Are they subtle about what their activities are? What are their powers? They don't have to necessarily be what they are in the mythology. They can be very different. So I guess maybe I would ask you to sort of explore that idea of how people would react to a real life encounter in modern society.
Remember the incident some years ago? Within recent memory, really.
You'll have to fill us in, ma'am.
Well, I remember I was at a class and actually a computer, and everybody got very excited because people kept getting messages on their phones that 2 Sukuyas were caught in Roseau. And according to the mythology, you're not supposed to, I think you don't pass on the left side of the Sukuya, or is it the right? I'm not sure.
On the left.
They don't let people pass on a particular side. And so neither one wanted to pass on the side. And they just stood as if transfixed in one spot. And in fact, I believe almost the whole of Dominica, people came down on buses, on trucks, because it seems those 2 people stood there for hours. Neither one wanted to move. I think somebody at the police, I'm not sure who came eventually, but that caused quite a stir in Dominica. And that was recently where they said, I mean, the 2 women were so there. And I mean, that's a real shame, really, because frankly, I mean, I don't believe in this. I believe when we had no electricity, when we had no roads, people used to think that the Sukuya, maybe they saw trees swaying in the breeze in the dark. And all of these stories sort of form part of their fear and their mind. But honestly, I don't believe in that. The Sukuya is supposed to suck your blood if for one moment. So much so when people had children going to sit exams, they would be very careful, especially if they had a neighbor or a friend, and not a friend, somebody they thought maybe was jealous of them, would do their child evil they would make sure that they never send that child anywhere near that person, or that they made the child wear, is it you wear your clothes, what is it on the wrong side? Anyway, there are so many little stories associated with the Sophia, but I mean, these are just myths to me when it comes down to it. But
So
For me,
they exist.
go
I had
on,
an
Sharon.
experience once in my village where this old lady, well, she was my neighbor, and the people in my village always tell me, don't make a pass on my left side. So I was going to the post office one day, and yeah, she's coming towards me, and I'm like, oh my God, she can't pass on my left side. So I'm there, and you know what she did? She lift me up after like an hour, because we there fighting, battling. I really let her pass, eh? And she lift me up. I was young, and just put me down, boom, and then she passed. And she's like, says, Sayoka Mutwew, says, Sayoka Mutwew, what they call? I said, but why you don't just pass? Now, if it's that what they're teaching me and you think I'm not doing something wrong, why you stay there for an hour battling me? I'm just a child. So I start to cry when she do that to me. Anytime, anyway, one time I go by her, my cousins say, come and see that. When I go inside the lady house, she had gone by and get some water. She had a big flat pail of blood in her house, and house
A
of
big
mirrors.
what? I'm sorry, a big what?
Flat thing of blood, a flat, you know, that aluminum pot we have back home.
And how you knew it was? How you knew it was blood?
It was blood. I saw
Could
it
have
in
been
my
sorrel.
Sorry, Chris, sorrel is a drink.
I know. We have a version in Newfoundland.
You know, so anyway.
You sure it wasn't Christmas time and she was making sorrel?
That was too much a big pot.
So
and there was no
see,
sorrel kettles.
So
this is contemporary Dominica.
Where would she have got all that blood?
She was sucking the people in the village.
Oh my gosh. And how did, so she regurgitated the blood? She came home and she vomited it up?
No idea, but she had no soucouyants. Nothing.
So Sharon, after you all looked at the blood, what did you all do? You all ran away?
Well, I was curious. When I look at her dogs now, her dogs' eyes were changing colors. She had a dog under the cellar, and they would be howling at nighttime. You know, like oh my God, it was just that's bizarre.
Well, I was gonna say, I find you last long in the place. But
I didn't stay too long, 5 minutes, just investigate to the mirrors. Another time now, as a different lady, me and my father were walking, and she called my father to do some thing for her, but my father's he left me. When my father came back, he came back a different person. He said the lady had so much mirrors in her house. He turned mentally ill after that. Like them things are real, man.
You think so?
I'm sorry to hear that.
I mean, I love these stories, but I really don't believe that they're real.
I don't believe it.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, this is her experience, so you know, give her the respect.
Yeah, true.
Okay. Can I come in there a little bit? Wait till you reach the age of 60, 62, and you're passing in the road quite relaxed, and somebody calls you a Sakuya. Or a neighbor comes and lives next to you, and for some bizarre reason, she says your husband is a larger Bliss and you are a Sakuya, and is intent on making sure that you leave the area and does all kind of bizarre things to you. I have experienced that in my little lifetime, and I was still teaching, and that lady wouldn't allow me on certain days to leave my house and go to school. She was there with a bucket of something to wet me down, because as far as she was concerned, I am a Sakuya. And for heaven's sake, I'm wondering, what did I do in my life to deserve that kind of treatment? So wait till it happens to you.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that.
I don't think this thing
believe in it because you're not a Sakuya. So
exactly.
Right.
And I have no idea what it does. And I believe it's just a myth, like the ancient Egyptian and other places have myths, like America have their myths where they have the witches flying on a broom all in black or something like that. And I think it happened that in the olden days, where people had no lights, anything they saw was an element of darkness in a way. Anything lighted they saw. And we had a lot of labels. We had a lot of insects with light in their
Light,
bottom. Yes,
we call them,
and they yes, and then people, my parents told me how they
fireflies.
made light. The fireflies. They
Yes,
put a lot
fireflies.
of fireflies during the day in a bottle, and during the night they had light, you know, and people just took those things to make myths out of them, and people believe them. But until it happened to you, because I call in while I was growing up as a child, I called enough old people Sakuya myself
Shame on you.
with other children. Shame on me. Shame on me. So it taught me when I get older, when I got
So karma,
older,
well,
that
karma. So that
people
was
just
karma.
came back to hunt.
Yeah,
And well,
That's just very sad.
eventually, when I reported and reported and reported that person, and I threatened to take her family to court, it turned out that that person is bipolar. And also she spent some time in the psychiatric unit. So now we have peace. We have
Wow.
peace in our home. But that lady was adamant and wouldn't let us sleep in the night, that we were Sukuyas and Laja Bliss.
Oh my
So,
God. Well, I
so
think
then
that's
we
a
can
very
create stories. Yes.
But
well.
even just to add, even well, I know, well, everybody has what they believe in and whatever it is. But I think it was Roy who said in the beginning that, you know, there are forces of evil and there are forces of light. And wherever there is light, there is evil. At some point, I did not pay too much attention to this whole Sukuya and this larger blaze and this way of these types of things. But then I started researching other cultures, not Caribbean cultures, because I mean we have similar cultures here, but European and other parts in even American to some point. And there are things that are similar with our folklore, these types of stories. There are things that you will note, or I noted, that are similar. So then, you know, you ask yourself a couple questions, whether or not these things are real.
I think that's probably a topic for a whole other workshop, talking about the parallels in our mythology across the world. You know,
But personally, though, I think this is fertile ground for us as writers to write about. I think folklore is an important part of our culture, and I think that we are kind of losing all of these things. You know, I mean, I have a 14-year-old son, and he doesn't even know what a Sakuya is unless when I wrote my book some years ago, he was really fascinated by that. He was like, "Oh, I've never heard of these things," and you know, it's just part of our culture. It's part of our folklore. You don't have to believe it, or you don't have to really think it's true. But I think it um, can be fertile ground for our creativity, and maybe even Netflix or one of these studios might pick one up. I mean, they have series on vampires and all kinds of things, and probably, you know, eventually our folklore and our stories of mythology could find a way to these big companies, but it has to start with us.
I think when I proposed this subject, I erroneously assumed it was further into the realm of mythology than into current culture than it actually is. You seem to have all had very rich personal experiences recently with this, and that was not something I had anticipated.
It is part of our culture. I mean, even today, I mean, whenever I spoke to my mother, I mean, my mother had to somehow weave something of that stuff into there. You know, it's like I had a bad knee last night, boy, but I think a Sakuya must be passing around the place. You know those kind of things. So it is very much part of our culture, even as our temporary culture. It is very much part of it.
And as you can see, it's the roots of superstition run so deeply that even, you know, even today, look at, you know, I believe it was Huguette who is talking about her experience with her neighbor.
Yes.
And I mean, look at the effects that had on a mind that was not stable, those stories. So I'm not so sure that maybe some of that should not fade away, because we need to progress and we need to stop, viewing older women as threats. So, but that's just me.
Well, I
You are
mean,
not.
yeah, it's. I think you bring up an interesting point, and that's something where writing stories about them can have that effect. I think, Nicole, where you're looking at the stereotypes or the regular characteristics of the Sakuya, and what does that person look like in real life? And I think that the real effects that you get, and Dorothy, I think you also mentioned you had a personal experience when you were younger. I think those are rich that you can bring forward and modernize. And I think that fits well into this world building idea, because it's so that what I'm trying to, I'm babbling and I apologize. What I'm trying to say is that ever-present Sakuya element of the culture is something that I don't have experience with, that I think is very interesting and very rich, that you can use to showcase and highlight and explain Dominican culture to people who don't share it. So yeah, I think that's an interesting way to go. All right. One question though, are Sakuya always female?
They came to the door? Yes.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, okay.
We
What
do
would
have
happen-
a male counterpart, but
Mhm.
it doesn't have the same sort of supernatural powers. So it's a Lugahu, which I think is closer to a werewolf in mythology. Or Loup-garou, which would be the French roots.
Right. Okay. So that
Lugahu. Lugahu.
Yes, I know, but I'm saying it comes from French.
French, loup for wool.
Loup-garou,
Yeah.
something like that.
Lugaru. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't pronounce the P.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
larger Bliss is the same as Sakuya, larger Bliss.
No, I think it's the cloven foot.
No, I think the Lajabra is more like a woodland mischievous spirit kind of thing, with a little wooden leg, with a goat leg or donkey leg.
Cloven hoof type
Yeah,
of thing.
something
Yeah,
like
or
that,
goat
yeah.
foot is,
Yeah,
but it's usually female too, right?
it's a female. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think they said
yeah.
the Lajabres used to play lots of tricks on drunk men. You know, like you coming from the rum shop and you will see this beautiful girl, and you would follow this beautiful girl, and she would take you to this mansion, and when you wake up in the next morning, you're in the middle of like nowhere. So that
When
was
the money
but
gone.
that was how we knew it growing up in our part of Dominica. It was the Elijah Bless basically played. It was like a mischievous spirit that's playing tricks on people, basically.
So you had to be scared of young women and old women.
No,
Women
no,
are
I'm scared.
dangerous.
No, I'm scared of Nicole.
What are you calling me? Which one are you calling me?
I'm not sure yet.
I'm very conscious of my age here, so be careful.
I just had a vision of all of these mythological feminine characters having a feminist revolution and just marching down the street demanding a correction of the public record.
Well, the evidence is against them, so yeah, that's an uphill battle. All those
Not
things
before,
of
not
blood.
before. Yes, not before I write about my experience.
Oh, are you planning to, Huguette?
That would be
Yes,
nice.
I am.
Yes, you
Of
should
course,
actually.
it
You
was
should.
fascinating. And now, well, my neighbor is sick, very sick, because of all the things she was doing. I mean, inhaling all that, what it was, safetida, and and Dettol, and all kind of things, you know. And I said, but that lady is going to get herself very sick, and she's sick. So I mean, the
It's tragic
experience
on
was,
both counts.
it,
This is a
yes,
tragedy both for both
it
of
was
you.
an experience. I tell you, we went through a tragic period where I really was looking to sell my house and move to somewhere else because I couldn't take it. Anyway, that happens. God doesn't give you what you cannot bear. So I intend to
but
write about it. I do
yeah, you
intend to
should
write about
actually,
it.
you should.
I intend to write about it.
That
But
would be
but
very interesting to read.
yes, but
I agree.
in a way that you'd end up feeling sorry for people that are sick and probably, I don't know, but their brain full of whatever.
Well, I was
So
going to
that
say,
myth, yes,
sorry, no, it's
go
just I
ahead.
say you have an opportunity here to address several serious topics, besides mental health, but also maybe about, as Chris was saying, this sort of misogynist tone to our stories and the way that we treat women in our fables and in our legends, and how that has played on the mind of this poor person.
Yes, and not only that, I mean the age group is not far different because I think I'm just about 10 years older than her. So it's not like, but it's the way we see our older folk and forget that they have contributed to the society. And I'm talking about, I was teaching, you know,
Yeah.
and I mean, this lady went to my work to find out what I was doing there, if I
Oh my
wasn't
gosh.
teaching the children about Obia,
Oh my word.
and you know what I mean?
That's some
After 40
serious
years
harassment.
of teaching, serious harassment. But when I went to the police, they told me I couldn't do anything because she seemed to be mental. So I went through another route and got them to check on her. And they came, they observed her, and then they insisted that the family take her to a physician. So several people had to come to look at her. And she was bipolar, and now that she's well, she would greet you and, nod. And I'm saying, geez, you even worried about answering. But I feel sorry for the sick. And we have a lot of sick people in our communities that we are not taking care of, and they feed on those things. And if they don't like you, especially if they're bipolar, you're in trouble.
Did you say
Sorry.
Okay.
But I think in
So
small societies, in small communities, you have often that kind of thing where neighbors get vexed, as they call it, vexed with each other. You have families who haven't been speaking to each other for years. And normally something is at the back of it, something similar, where one is being accused of putting a spell on one person's child, so you have situations like that in the small villages and, often. So I guess it's not uncommon. Yeah.
right. So I think we're slightly off topic, but I just wanted to bring it back to world building. And I wanted to just ask if anybody had any specific questions or if they wanted me to explain something else.
I think you should just go ahead and explain something else because of our time limit here.
Yeah, the time is moving on. Yeah.
Okay.
Because
So
you said you had another scenario.
I do have one more scenario. And I think this one is interesting in light of the last conversation. Women in Dominica develop elemental magic powers. Think fire, earth, water, air kind of thing, but only the women. The men do not have this power. How does that affect how a family would function or how your society functions? What are the ripple effects that would have?
Well, I can see a more fertility, like what I think we would be reading more about like the signs, the horoscopes, and going deeper into that. Like Virgo is known for fertility, so we can use more of these elements from there. The more when we research more about Virgo, we can find out what to do for women to become fertile. We see a lot of people right now being infertile. Like, what can we use? Pomegranates, all the natural herbs to bring healing, maybe, to our society.
Okay.
I think the dynamic between men and women would shift in such a way that perhaps there might be more women holding positions of power. Dominica is already what they call, quote unquote, a matrifocal society in any case. But I think that if we had the actual control over the elements, it would just make sense for women to have the positions of power and to occupy those positions. Because literally a minister for disaster preparedness would have control over the seas, control over the winds. I think it would also create a bit of resentment in at least a portion of the male population at seeing that power stripped, or how they would perceive power being stripped away from them. And unfortunately, I mean, this is kind of the first thing that came to my mind. I was thinking, what happens in a family where there's a domestic violence situation, gender-based violence? What happens to a man who feels emasculated in his own home because his wife has powers he doesn't have?
For the violence and conflict.
Yes, it might actually aggravate a situation like that.
Well, a woman in that kind of a situation would have the power to react, and that reaction might be deadly.
Yeah. So
I think
just spitballing.
Yeah, well, I mean, people don't give up political control easily. And I think you're right in that all of a sudden you would have half of the population who does not have the power that they used to have. And that could cause a violent reaction. I don't know how likely that is, but
I can see the men burning up women because they want that power. Yeah.
I could more see maybe a segregation. That's probably almost like a polarization in communities, where maybe we would have communities that were all male, and maybe some that were all female.
That's fascinating. How would that work?
Well, it happens now. I can think, for example, of one community in Africa where there's a village that's made up of only women and children. And it's run by a female village leader, and men are not allowed to visit. But it's because, I mean, most of these people are survivors of some form of abuse, or they just choose not to go along with the social expectations for their gender in their particular tribes or countries. So you also have, I guess, historically the Amazons, whether they're myth or not. So the idea of all male societies, monasteries, priests, monks, it's not really that far out of our experience.
Or women may turn around and instead of having polygamy, you might have polyandry. The women might decide to take it into their own hands and have it around and have many husbands, whereas in polygamy it's one man and different wives. So that could be one of the offshoots when the women have power. Or you could have women, a situation where the family situation and the woman is very much aware of her power, but she doesn't want to upset her home. So she makes things appear to be normal, maybe give the man the impression he's in charge. But then now, behind the scenes, she controls the situation, but she doesn't let on. I'm not sure if at the end, if it will be discovered, but she behind the scenes, and then you see
So she
suddenly
hides her
maybe, yes, good luck. So maybe suddenly things happen in the family. Probably the man thinks that he's the one causing it, whereas she's the one behind the scenes. But that's her personality. She doesn't really want to create conflict or confusion. So
I could see that, yeah, Mrs. Lee, I could see that especially in a farming scenario where he thinks it's the sweat of his brow that's bringing in the crops, and it's actually her controlling, controlling the growth with her power.
That sounds more likely what would happen in Dominica. I think that's more consistent with the culture that I've come to know. But I'm interested how people of faith would react.
People of
But if she has power, couldn't she use the power to the benefit of her family and change things for the better?
Well, that's
use the
what
power,
I'm saying. But she doesn't want
power
to
in a good way.
But she doesn't want, let's say, the man, human nature. And even if it would be for the ultimate good, if a person feels that his power is threatened or his authority, it might create resentment. So if she behind the scenes would let things happen in a successful way, but still let him believe that he's the one controlling it or doing it.
But couldn't her power be used to change people?
Could be, yeah.
This could lead to upliftment of both sex.
Right.
Because with the segregation that Nicole was talking about, women can be empowered, like the other women that know so much will enlighten the poorer people in the village or community, and educate the women. Let's say the women were always being abused. Now these women they can come together, they congregate now, they're free to congregate without violence of the men because the men are not there interfering. So they're educated, they are enlightened, and whereas with the men now, they can also be educated on, hey, how to treat your women, how not to do that, and all vice versa. So that it will be a very good thing for society, maybe.
I agree. And if there's any violence, put a spell of impotence on the man.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm hearing a strong favor of the women creating their own communities and just leaving the men out in the forest. Is that
Roy? Where's Roy? Roy, stand up for your brethren, man.
That's not fair.
I wouldn't say to leave them out. Not really, Chris. I wouldn't think to leave them out. Work together with them, try to move forward. But on the other hand, for the women, of course, in their superior judgment and discretion, would know really what to say, what not to say, and not let the man believe that all authority is being taken from him, even if it is.
But I like the idea that Dorothy had brought up earlier about the reorganization of the family around the women having all of the power. And yeah, I think that was interesting. And Roy, what were you going to say?
Sorry, I think I lost contact a while ago, and I kind of missed some of what was said.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, we were basically the women had decided that the men were useless and that they were going to form their own community of.
Well, I don't know. I think I'm kind of seeing it from my father's perspective. That it would cause major problems because my father was the kind of person who was always the mannish man. As a matter of fact, whenever he had some problems with my mother, he would always say, it's all you women that give men the apple to eat in the Garden of Eden. That's why we're in such a state today, so
rings a bell, Roy, rings a bell.
So I think it would cause a major problem, at least from my perspective. Yeah, and then you could even have like some kind of class or sex wars between the men and the women with all the powers, and the men kind of trying to to gain the power that they always think that they have. So that is the scenario I'm thinking in my head, that with the women having all the power, the men would eventually try to try to gain power themselves, so that they could always be on top of the women. I think even in my area growing up on the East Coast Kalinago territory, that has always been the case, where the man is supposed to be the man, and like my father would always say, I am the head of this house, you know what I mean? So so it would definitely cause problems, at least from my perspective, and
Yes.
probably it just
Maybe.
probably start a sex war, between the two.
Maybe men would use science as, try to use science as their counterbalance.
Yeah,
Technology.
probably. Yeah.
Well, that
The
is why I
form-
said because the woman would have superior judgment and discretion, she would be able to or should be able to act in such a way that she does not antagonize or cause the man to distance himself from her. That she would use it in such a way that even while she controls from behind, she could let him think that he still is doing the steering of the ship.
Right.
Sorry, can I talk? I have
Yes.
I have seen some stories where um, the men create a world and they have other men working for them. I am in my story, I would have the women's world and have the men working for them. And it would be a matter of we all are families, we all are one family, and everybody have their partner, their mate, and the women are the one that have the powers and the men cannot do a thing about it. So if you wanted to go from that point to that point, you don't need a vehicle. You would just zoom across and and well, the powers would be in the hands of the woman, and that would just be the world, and we would just show the world, the present world, that women can control or have a better world. Let them see our perspective on a good world, nice families being raised, and the men just conform and stuff like that. The same way they want us to conform to anything, to everything. We will just show them a nice scenario, a nice world where women are in charge. What do you think?
So you would portray a more idealistic version of our current society. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, but God made women in his image, well, not his image and likeness, because you all say that God is a man anyway, but in the image of a likeness of goodness, and using their powers to create a very nice, simple world where we have no bickering, no problems, because you can use your power to quench or to quench any problems. So money would not be necessary because everything would be running smooth with women's power.
I have a question. Mrs. Levy,
Yes.
so you have run a microcosm of this society that Huguette is theorizing here, of all-female world where there's supposed to be peace and no bickering. So maybe you can tell us how realistic that that is.
No, are you talking to work or home?
Work.
Work, but then you forget that we had males. It wasn't all female.
But it was majority females.
Yes, majority female at the convent high school. Yes. But I
So,
mean,
would you consider that to have been an idealized society?
well, it did not get, I mean, personal. It did not get personal, and there was no, how should I put it, any threat to anyone's dignity or anyone's personal life. There was no threat. So I don't think that the two are comparable. I think that they're different. I mean, we have had several institutions in Dominica headed by women, and you have both sexes as staff members. And I think that's something that people are accustomed to. So I don't think that there was any confusion or any conflict there.
I think that's an excellent point, because when you're building a new society or a new world around some elements that you're changing, you can draw inspiration from your real world experiences, like working in a female dominated workplace. I mean, I work in one. I'm not sure how different it is from working in an all male and work environment. I've never worked in one, but I think that drawing on that experience can be a very rich ground for creating the realism that you're going to need in your story. Because although the surface elements will be different, the underlying truth of that experience and that workplace or that lived experience is going to ring true to the reader. So I think that's ultimately one of the things that you want to do, is make sure that you can get that ring of truth, even though we're working with the surface layer of fantasy or science fiction. All right, so that's all the scenarios that I had for today. Does anybody have any final questions? No? Okay. Well, I wanted to.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. I couldn't tap the correct button. I was trying. What's the difference? The big difference between fantasy and science fiction? I mean, I have an idea in my head of what it should be, but let me hear it from you. Is that if you didn't explain it before?
Yeah, science fiction tends to sorry, I'm thinking in French. It's focused more on a technology of some sort. Things are grounded in science in a way. So Star Trek is very much science fiction because they're on spaceships and things are controlled by physics, and there's an explanation for everything. Whereas fantasy tends to be more mythological. There tends to be magic, which is less grounded in reality. There are many different types of fantasy. Folklore falls into the fantasy genre because there's that mythology that is the basis of all fantasy. And science fiction tends to be more of a sociological commentary than, well, both of them are, but fantasy is more explicitly so. Is that clear yet?
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you. I mean,
Okay.
I had that sort of connection with the two, but I just wanted to hear it again.
If you're using magic, it's fantasy. If you're not, probably science fiction. Dorothy, did you have a question?
No, not
No, okay.
at this stage, right?
Okay. Oh, and I'm getting a phone call. 1 second here.
Was there anybody else who had any questions or any comments, maybe feedback for Chris on the workshop? How about our new member here? I'm sorry, there. Your name is Tasha? Miss Bella?
It's Taisha.
Taisha, yes. So, well, this was your first workshop. Were there any sort of, was there any sort of feedback you'd like to share with us, your thoughts? Did I put you on the spot?
It's okay. We can end it here. I'm going to stop the recording now, and